Amanda Johnson was a single mother who loved her community. She worked hard to make a good life for her son Elijah and spent her free time helping others. Today was supposed to be a joyful day. Amanda had planned a community event to bring people together, something she had been working on for months. She dressed in her best outfit, grabbed her materials, and headed out, feeling proud of what she was about to accomplish. As she drove through the streets, she hummed softly to her favorite music. The sun shone brightly, and everything seemed perfect. Until she noticed the flashing lights of a police car in her rearview mirror. Her heart sank. She had done nothing wrong. So why was she being pulled over? Amanda pulled her car to the side of the road and rolled down her window. Officer Chad Barnes approached her vehicle. He was tall and had a stern look on his face. Amanda had heard stories about him from others in her neighborhood, but she had never met him before. "License and registration," Chad said, his tone sharp. Amanda nodded politely and handed him the documents. "Officer, may I ask why I was stopped?" she asked calmly. Chad narrowed his eyes. "Are you questioning me?" he said, his voice rising slightly. Amanda stayed calm. "No, sir. I just wanted to know." Chad looked at her documents for a moment before tossing them back at her through the window. "Step out of the car," he ordered. Amanda was confused. "Is something wrong, officer?" "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he snapped. Her hands shook slightly as she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out of the car. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong, but Chad's tone was unsettling. A few people nearby had stopped to watch. "Put your hands on the hood," Chad said. Amanda did as she was told, feeling embarrassed and confused. She tried to remain calm, but inside, her heart was racing. "Officer, I don't understand." Before she could finish, Chad interrupted her. "You don't need to understand. Just do as you're told." The situation was escalating quickly, and Amanda could feel the tension building. She wanted to speak up, but she knew she needed to stay composed. Across the street, a young man named Malik noticed what was happening. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Others joined him, whispering among themselves about how unnecessary the situation seemed. Chad noticed the growing crowd and seemed to get angrier. "Stay back," he barked at the onlookers. Amanda turned her head slightly, meeting the eyes of a few people in the crowd. Their presence gave her a bit of courage. "Officer, please, I've done nothing wrong," she said again, her voice steady. But Chad didn't seem to care. He stepped closer, his tone even harsher. "You think you're smarter than me. Is that it?" Amanda held her ground, her dignity intact. She didn't yell or argue, but she didn't let herself be intimidated either. She wasn't going to let him make her feel small. Little did Chad know, this moment would mark the beginning of a battle he wasn't prepared for. Amanda's quiet strength and the community's support would soon turn this unjust encounter into a powerful fight for justice. Amanda stood by her car, her hands on the hood as Officer Chad barked orders at her. The sun was warm on her back, but her heart felt cold with fear and confusion. She kept asking herself what she had done to deserve this treatment, but no answers came. The small crowd that had gathered whispered among themselves, and Amanda could feel their eyes on her. Chad paced around her car, muttering to himself. "Uncooperative," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You people never know when to follow orders." Amanda turned her head slightly. "Officer, I've been nothing but respectful," she said softly. Chad spun around, his face red. "Don't talk back to me," he shouted. His voice echoed, making the situation feel even more tense. Amanda straightened slightly, meeting his gaze. "I'm not talking back. I'm just asking for fairness," she said calmly. The officer stepped closer, towering over her. The crowd murmured louder now, their concern growing. Malik, the young man who had been recording earlier, moved closer with his phone. Chad noticed the phone and glared at Malik. "You, put that phone away," he ordered. Malik didn't budge. "It's my right to record," he said firmly. Amanda glanced at Malik and gave him a small nod, grateful for his courage. But Chad's frustration only seemed to grow. He turned back to Amanda, his voice sharp. "You think this is a game? You think you can embarrass me?" Amanda shook her head, her voice steady. "No, officer. I just want to know why I'm being treated like this." That was when Chad did something Amanda didn't expect. He raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The sound was loud and shocking, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. Amanda stumbled back slightly, her cheek stinging from the blow. For a moment, everything felt still. The crowd gasped in unison, their disbelief filling the air. Malik's phone captured every second, and his voice trembled as he said, "You can't do that. She didn't do anything." Amanda straightened herself, her head held high despite the pain. She didn't cry or yell. Instead, she took a deep breath and looked directly at Chad. "You had no right to do that," she said, her voice firm but calm. Chad's face froze for a second, realizing the gravity of what he had just done. But instead of apologizing, he muttered, "You brought this on yourself." The crowd was no longer silent. People shouted at Chad, telling him he had gone too far. Malik, still recording, spoke louder. "We saw everything. You can't get away with this." Amanda stood tall, refusing to let her dignity be taken away. "I'm going to fight this," she said, her voice steady and filled with determination. Chad looked uneasy now. The weight of the crowd's judgment and the camera recording his every move seemed to sink in. But Amanda wasn't focused on him anymore. She was focused on what she needed to do next. This wasn't just about her. This was about standing up for what was right, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. The crowd's support gave her strength, and she knew this was only the beginning of her fight for justice. Amanda stood beside her car, her cheek still stinging from Officer Chad's slap, but her spirit remained unbroken. Around her, the small crowd that had gathered was no longer silent. They were outraged, their voices rising in protest against the officer's behavior. "That's not right," someone shouted from the back of the crowd. "You can't treat people like this," another voice added. Malik stepped forward, still holding his phone. "It's all on video," he said firmly. "Everyone will see what you did." Chad glanced nervously at the growing group of witnesses. His once confident posture now seemed shaky. "Step back," he barked, trying to regain control. But the people didn't move. Instead, they drew closer, their frustration turning into a united front of support for Amanda. Amanda turned to the crowd, her voice calm but filled with determination. "Thank you for standing with me," she said. "This is wrong, and we all know it. But we have to handle this the right way." Her words seemed to calm the crowd, and they nodded in agreement. Amanda's strength and composure inspired them. Malik walked over to her, lowering his phone for a moment. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," Amanda said, though the pain on her face was still visible. "But this isn't just about me. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Meanwhile, Chad was pacing, clearly unsure of what to do next. The situation was spiraling out of his control, and he knew it. The crowd's eyes were on him, their phones recording every move he made. Just then, an older woman in the crowd stepped forward. Her name was Mrs. Jenkins, a longtime resident of the neighborhood and a respected figure in the community. She spoke with a voice that carried both wisdom and authority. "Officer," she said, "you've gone too far. We're not here to fight you, but we're not going to stand by and let this happen." Chad didn't respond, but his unease was evident. Amanda nodded at Mrs. Jenkins, appreciating her support. Then she turned to Malik. "Can you send that video to me? I'm going to file a complaint," she said. Malik nodded. "Of course, and I'll share it online. People need to see what happened." As the crowd continued to stand in solidarity, a police supervisor arrived on the scene. He stepped out of his car, his face serious as he took in the situation. The crowd quickly explained what had happened, showing him the video Malik had recorded. The supervisor turned to Chad. his tone stern. "Go wait in the car," he ordered. Chad hesitated, but eventually obeyed, his face pale. The supervisor approached Amanda. "I'm sorry for what happened. We'll be investigating this," he said. Amanda met his gaze. "I hope you mean that," she said, "because this can't just be swept under the rug." The crowd cheered softly, encouraged by Amanda's courage. They weren't just witnesses anymore. They were part of a movement. Amanda knew this was just the start. She would take this fight to the next level, not just for herself, but for her community. With their support and her unwavering determination, she was ready to make sure justice would be served. The evening after the incident, Amanda sat at her kitchen table, her cheek still red and her heart heavy with frustration. Elijah, her young son, brought her a glass of water. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked, his wide eyes full of concern. Amanda smiled and hugged him. "I'm fine, sweetheart. But what happened today wasn't right, and I need to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." After putting Elijah to bed, Amanda picked up her phone and began making calls. First, she reached out to Malik, who quickly sent her the video he had recorded. "This is going to help you," Malik said. "Everyone who saw it is on your side." Next, Amanda called Angela Ross, a well-known civil rights lawyer in the city. Angela had a reputation for standing up against injustice, and Amanda had always admired her work. Amanda explained everything that had happened, her voice steady despite the emotions bubbling beneath the surface. Angela listened carefully. "Amanda, what happened to you is unacceptable," she said firmly. "The video Malik recorded is powerful evidence. We can use it to file a formal complaint and pursue legal action against the officer." Amanda nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "I'm ready to fight this," she said. The next morning, Amanda and Angela went to the police department to file an official complaint against Officer Chad. They were met with skepticism at first, but when Angela mentioned the video evidence, attitudes shifted. Amanda handed over copies of the footage, ensuring the department couldn't ignore what had happened. Word about the incident continued to spread. Malik had posted the video online, and it quickly went viral. People from all over the city, and even beyond, shared the video with hashtags demanding justice. Amanda's story resonated with many who had faced similar experiences but hadn't had the courage or support to speak up. Angela organized a press conference where Amanda stood in front of a crowd of reporters. Her voice was calm but strong as she recounted the events. "What happened to me wasn't just about one bad day," she said. "It's about a system that allows this kind of behavior to go unchecked. I'm here today not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been treated unfairly." The press conference drew even more attention to Amanda's case. Community leaders, activists, and even local politicians began speaking out in her support. Angela worked tirelessly, gathering witness statements, additional video footage, and examples of Chad's previous misconduct. Meanwhile, Chad faced mounting pressure. The police department placed him on administrative leave as the investigation continued. Former victims of his aggressive behavior came forward, adding to the evidence against him. Amanda's determination never wavered. She balanced her fight for justice with her responsibilities at home, making sure Elijah felt safe and loved. "We're standing up for what's right," she told him one evening as they shared dinner. Elijah nodded, his small hand reaching for hers. "You're brave, Mom," he said. Amanda smiled, feeling her strength grow. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her son's future and the future of their community. As Amanda's story spread like wildfire, the police department found itself under a harsh spotlight. Calls from reporters flooded their office, demanding answers about Officer Chad's actions. Community leaders and activists organized peaceful rallies outside the station, holding signs that read "Justice for Amanda" and "End Police Misconduct." Inside the department, however, there was a different kind of activity. Some officers and administrators began whispering about damage control. Instead of focusing on addressing the real issue, they worked on ways to protect their reputation. One morning, Amanda received a surprising call from a local journalist. "Ms. Johnson," the woman began, "the police have released body camera footage of the incident, but it's edited." Amanda frowned. "Edited? How?" "They've only shared clips where Officer Chad looks calm and professional," the journalist explained. "There's no sign of his aggression or the slap." Amanda's frustration grew, but Angela reassured her. "This isn't surprising," Angela said. "Sometimes people in power will do anything to shift the narrative. But don't worry. We have the full video Malik recorded, and it speaks louder than their edited version." The department's attempt to distort the truth only made the community more determined. Malik's video continued to gain traction online, with millions of people viewing it. Social media users compared the police's footage to Malik's, and the discrepancies were obvious. Amanda stayed focused. She attended every rally organized in her support, standing side by side with her neighbors. People from all walks of life came to show solidarity. Students, parents, business owners, and even some off-duty officers who believed in justice. At one rally, Mrs. Jenkins, the respected elder from Amanda's neighborhood, spoke into the microphone. "This isn't just about Amanda," she said passionately. "This is about every single person who has ever felt powerless against unfair treatment. Amanda's courage has given us all the reason to stand up and demand better." The crowd cheered, and Amanda felt tears in her eyes. She never expected her fight to inspire so many people. Meanwhile, Angela worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She gathered testimonies from witnesses, including Malik and Mrs. Jenkins, and collected records of complaints previously filed against Officer Chad. To everyone's shock, a pattern began to emerge. Chad had a long history of complaints for similar behavior, but they had been quietly dismissed or ignored. The media latched onto this new development, and soon, Chad's name was on every news channel. Reporters began asking hard questions. Why was this officer still on duty? Who had been protecting him? The police department scrambled to respond. The pressure from the public and the media made it clear they couldn't sweep this under the rug. They announced an internal investigation, but the community remained skeptical. Amanda refused to let their tactics intimidate her. She spoke at every rally, gave interviews, and continued to work with Angela on building a strong case. "They can try to hide the truth," Amanda told the crowd at one event, "but we won't let them. Together, we're stronger than any cover-up." The people cheered, their voices united in support. Amanda felt her confidence grow. The department's attempts to silence her only made her resolve stronger. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. The tide was beginning to turn, and Amanda knew that justice was within reach. The pressure on Officer Chad Barnes was mounting, and it seemed like the whole city was watching. News stations aired Malik's video alongside clips of Amanda's heartfelt speeches at rallies, and the story dominated headlines. Everywhere Chad went, people recognized him, and their disapproval was evident. His once confident demeanor began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. More troubling for Chad, people from his past started coming forward. A young man named Carlos shared his story in an emotional interview, describing how Chad had unfairly targeted him during a traffic stop 2 years ago. Another woman, a nurse named Sandra, revealed how Chad had harassed her during a routine check at a community health event. Their accounts painted a disturbing picture of an officer who had abused his authority for years. As more victims spoke out, Angela compiled their statements to strengthen Amanda's case. "This is bigger than we thought," Angela told Amanda during one of their meetings. "It's clear that Chad has a pattern of behavior, and the department has been protecting him." Amanda nodded, her resolve growing stronger. "We can't just stop at holding him accountable," she said. "We need to make sure the system changes so this doesn't happen again." Meanwhile, the public outcry against Chad and the department grew louder. Peaceful protests continued to fill the streets, with signs calling for justice and accountability. Community leaders organized forums where people shared their experiences with police misconduct. Amanda attended every event, listening and offering words of encouragement. One evening, Amanda stood before a packed auditorium at one such forum. "This fight isn't just about me," she told the crowd. "It's about every person who has been silenced, every person who has felt powerless. Together, we're showing that our voices matter." The crowd erupted in applause, and Amanda felt a surge of hope. Back at the police department, the leadership was under intense scrutiny. Reporters pressed for answers about why Chad had been allowed to stay on the force despite multiple complaints. Public officials began calling for an independent investigation into the department's practices. Chad, now on administrative leave, felt the walls closing in. He tried to defend himself in a statement, claiming he had acted within the law, but his words fell flat. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the public wasn't buying his excuses. Even some of Chad's fellow officers began distancing themselves. A few brave officers publicly voiced their support for Amanda and called for reforms within the department. "We took an oath to protect and serve," one officer said during a press conference. "When one of us breaks that trust, it hurts everyone." Amanda watched these developments with a mix of relief and determination. She knew the fight wasn't over, but the tide was turning. The community's support and the growing momentum against Chad gave her hope that real change was possible. As the weeks went on, Angela worked tirelessly to prepare for the legal battle ahead. Amanda remained focused, balancing her fight for justice with her responsibilities at home. Elijah often sat beside her as she reviewed documents or prepared for interviews. "Mom, you're so brave," he told her one night. Amanda hugged him tightly. "I'm doing this for you," she said, "so you can grow up in a world that's fair." The backlash against Chad was just the beginning. Amanda knew the hardest battles were yet to come, but she was ready. With her community behind her, she was determined to see justice served and make a lasting impact. The day of the trial had finally arrived. Amanda woke up early, her heart heavy with a mix of nerves and determination. Elijah hugged her tightly before she left for court. "You've got this, Mom," he said with a proud smile. Amanda kissed his forehead, drawing strength from his unwavering support. At the courthouse, a large crowd had gathered to show their support for Amanda. Community members held signs that read "Justice for Amanda" and "Accountability Now." Amanda walked past them with Angela by her side, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had stood by her throughout this journey. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Chad sat at the defendant's table, looking uneasy. His lawyer tried to project confidence, but the mountain of evidence against him was impossible to ignore. Amanda took her seat, her back straight and her head held high. Angela began the proceedings with a powerful opening statement. "This case isn't just about one incident," she said, her voice firm and clear. "It's about a pattern of abuse that has gone unchecked for far too long. Today, we will show the truth." The prosecution presented its evidence, starting with Malik's video. The courtroom fell silent as the footage played on a large screen. Every word, every action, and every moment of Chad's aggression was laid bare for everyone to see. Amanda watched the jury closely. Their expressions showed shock and disapproval. Witness after witness took the stand, recounting their experiences with Chad. Malik spoke passionately about what he had seen that day, and Mrs. Jenkins shared her perspective as a community elder. Each testimony painted a picture of an officer who had used his badge to intimidate and harm instead of protect. Chad's lawyer tried to discredit the witnesses, but Angela countered each argument with precision and facts. She pointed out inconsistencies in Chad's defense and highlighted the pattern of complaints that had been ignored by the police department. When it was Amanda's turn to testify, the courtroom listened intently. She described the events of that day with clarity and dignity, never once raising her voice or showing anger. "I didn't want this fight," she said, her voice steady. "But when I was treated unfairly, I knew I couldn't stay silent. This is about more than me. It's about standing up for what's right." The defense tried to paint Amanda as confrontational, but Angela quickly shut down their attempts. She reminded the jury that the evidence clearly showed Chad's actions were unjustified. As the trial progressed, the weight of the evidence became undeniable. Chad's body camera footage, though edited, only added to his downfall when compared to the unedited videos from the crowd. The jury saw the truth for themselves, and it was impossible to ignore. In her closing statement, Angela delivered a heartfelt message. Justice isn't just a word, it's a principle. And today, we have the chance to uphold it. Amanda Johnson stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Now it's time for us to stand with her. The courtroom was silent as the jury deliberated. Amanda waited anxiously, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She glanced at Angela, who gave her a reassuring nod. No matter the outcome, Amanda knew she had done everything in her power to seek justice. The jury returned to the courtroom after hours of deliberation. The silence was heavy as everyone waited for the verdict. Amanda sat beside Angela, her heart pounding. The community members who had supported her were seated in the gallery, holding their breath in anticipation. The judge looked at the jury foreperson. "Have you reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson replied, standing tall. The room felt still as a stone as the foreperson began to read. "In the matter of misconduct and excessive use of force, we find the defendant, Officer Chad Barnes, guilty." The words echoed through the courtroom, breaking the silence. Amanda closed her eyes, relief washing over her. The gallery erupted into quiet cheers and whispers of support, though the judge quickly called for order. Chad's face was pale. He slumped in his seat, realizing the consequences of his actions had finally caught up to him. For years, he had operated without accountability, but now, the truth was undeniable. The judge addressed the court. Officer Barnes's actions violated the trust and responsibilities of his role. Today, this court sends a clear message that such behavior has no place in our justice system. Chad was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay restitution to Amanda. In addition, the court ruled that he would no longer be allowed to serve as a law enforcement officer. The decision marked the end of his career and a turning point for the community. As the court adjourned, Amanda stood, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She turned to Angela, who smiled and said, "You did it, Amanda. Your courage made this possible." Outside the courthouse, a large crowd had gathered. When Amanda stepped out, she was met with applause and cheers. She waved, tears filling her eyes as she saw the faces of people who had stood by her every step of the way. Malik approached her, his phone tucked away for once. "You were amazing in there," he said. Amanda smiled. "I couldn't have done it without everyone's support. This wasn't just my fight, it was ours." Reporters surrounded Amanda, asking for her reaction to the verdict. She spoke with grace and determination. "This isn't just about holding one person accountable," she said. "It's about changing a system that allows this kind of behavior. Today is a step forward, but the work isn't done." The impact of Amanda's case rippled far beyond the courtroom. Her victory inspired others to speak out against injustice, and her story became a symbol of hope and change. Activists pushed for new policies to ensure accountability within the police department, including mandatory body camera usage and improved training on community relations. The City Council announced plans to create a civilian oversight committee to review complaints against law enforcement. Amanda was invited to join the committee, and she accepted with pride. "If I can help make a difference," she said, "then all of this was worth it." That evening, Amanda returned home to Elijah. He hugged her tightly, beaming with pride. "You're my hero, Mom," he said. Amanda knelt down and looked into his eyes. "And you're mine," she replied. As she tucked him into bed, she felt a deep sense of peace. Justice had been served, but more importantly, a message had been sent that standing up for what's right can create real change. Life began to settle back into a normal rhythm for Amanda, but it wasn't the same as before. She had become a symbol of hope and resilience in her community. Wherever she went, people would approach her to thank her for her courage. Some even shared their own stories of unfair treatment, inspired by Amanda's bravery to come forward. Amanda knew her fight didn't end with the courtroom victory. She joined the city's new Civilian Oversight Committee, determined to ensure that no one else would have to go through what she did. At her first meeting, she spoke passionately about the importance of fairness and transparency. "The system works best when it serves the people," she said. "We're here to make sure that happens." Her words resonated deeply, and the committee got to work. Together, they implemented new policies for officer accountability, including better training programs and a streamlined process for reporting misconduct. Amanda felt proud knowing her efforts were helping to create a safer and more just community. Meanwhile, Malik's video continued to circulate online, sparking conversations far beyond Amanda's city. People across the country shared it as an example of how ordinary citizens could stand up against injustice. Malik, now inspired to do more, started a project documenting similar cases to bring attention to them. "Amanda's story showed me how powerful the truth can be," he said in an interview. Amanda also began speaking at events in schools, sharing her journey to inspire others. At one event, a young girl approached her shyly. "I want to be brave like you," she said. Amanda knelt down and smiled. "You already are," she replied. Despite her new responsibilities, Amanda remained focused on her role as a mother. Elijah, now more aware of the world around him, often asked questions about fairness and justice. Amanda used these moments to teach him about kindness, respect, and standing up for what's right. One evening, Elijah sat with her as she prepared notes for an upcoming speech. "Mom, do you think people will always do the right thing now?" he asked. Amanda paused and looked at him. "Not always," she admitted. "But if enough of us stand up when things aren't right, we can make the world better. That's why we don't give up." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "Then I'll help too," he said with determination. Amanda hugged him, feeling a swell of pride. "You already are," she whispered. Months after the trial, the city unveiled a mural in honor of Amanda and the community's fight for justice. It depicted Amanda standing tall, surrounded by people of all backgrounds, symbolizing unity and strength. At the mural's dedication ceremony, Amanda stood before a crowd and spoke from her heart. "This mural isn't about me," she said. "It's about what we can achieve together. Change happens when we speak up, when we support one another, and when we refuse to accept what's wrong. This is just the beginning." The crowd erupted into applause, their voices filled with hope and determination. As Amanda walked home that evening, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her journey had been difficult, but it had brought about real change. She had fought for justice, not just for herself, but for her community, and she had shown her son and the world that standing up for what's right could make all the difference.